Now, today, we are gonna see, what if Harry Potter had relation with unknown goddess? Please subscribe this channel, because definitely I will try my best to provide a valuable content for you all. Also check the description to support the original author for this beautiful creation. Please, you know I met an ever-knowing soothsayer in New Orleans once. When I was 7 she handed me a drink with the lovely message, if my fate were yours I'd find a nice quiet place where no one would ever find me and blow my fucking brains all over a wall. It'd be a lot less painful and messy. Bottoms up. And you know what that means? I asked Mrs. Weasley, stopping her rant about my drinking cold. That means I need a bigger shot glass. See a Potter, she spluttered, but I ignored her in favor of filling my shot glass again and downing it. I didn't care what she said. This wasn't her house and she wasn't my mother. It didn't matter. Nothing really mattered anymore. Annabeth was gone. And in hindsight Nyx, the soothsayer, not the primordial goddess, was right. Not now, Mrs. Weasley, I said softly, moving from the kitchen and sneaking into Sirius's room. He was curled up in his bed, the blankets tangled around his shirtless form. I sat myself down on the carpet and leant against the foot of the bed. My life had been one big crap load of bad luck since the day I was born. My name is Sia Potter, and due to time travel messing with my life, thank you Granddaddy Kronos for poking holes in time that the fates sent me to go fix. I was not 15 as I should be, but rather almost 17. My parents are Lily Potter and Poseidon, god of the sea. Later, I was blood adopted by my mother's husband James Potter. She didn't cheat on him. There was no accidentally drunk one-night stand after a fight or anything like that. Papa, what I imagine I would have called James if he and Mum had lived, was hit with a curse that stopped him from having children. In addition to this, he was also bi, and when he and Mum wanted to have a baby, well, I think the technical term is a threesome. On October 31st they were killed by Voldemort and I was left with my magic-hating aunt and uncle. My mother's sister. At about 3, they took me on vacation and then left me there at a dock while they finished cruise, in Greece. After that I raised myself, skipping around the world until I found myself in New York City at 9. 9 was the age I discovered that I was a demigod. I went to camp and went on my first quest with Annabeth and Grover. To the underworld, to find the lightning bolt that belonged to my uncle Zeus. I collected my first camp bead and then I left until the next summer. After that came the Sea of Monster, looking for the Golden Fleece. That was an adventure and a half, not to mention meeting my Cyclops half-brother Tyson. Then came Hogwarts, and all its tricks and trappings. The Mountain Troll, Voldemort, Fluffy, Norbert. By the time camp rolled around again, I was just glad I hadn't gone slack in wondering where the next thread to my life was coming from and hadn't started to trust too easily. Morbid, but hey, silver lining. That summer we rescued Artemis, and I held the sky. You would not believe how heavy that is. Zoe and Bianca died on the quest, and the white streak in my hair was fudged blue, green and purple to remember and to honor them. Even though Zoe would be remembered every time I looked up. A constellation in the sky. Hogwarts was full of fun again. Giant basilisks, almost dying, petrified friend, giant talking spiders and potions that changed you into someone else as long as you had one of their hairs. Then came the labyrinth and the battle at camp. So many funeral pyres. Most of them for people the same age or younger than me. Damn Kronos. And damn his war. After that came 2 years' worth of being juggled through time to fix the things that Kronos was trying to change back. 3rd year there were Dementors to prey on my every nightmare. Looking back at my life, do you really even want to imagine what it was I was seeing? I gain a godfather, maybe even some kind of actual parental figure, because D Immortals knows Dad lost that, if he ever had it in the first place, when he made it clear that his love for me was not strictly platonic. I didn't mind. I'm not saying that I encouraged him, but I didn't feel uncomfortable around him or any of them. Camp believes that gods don't have DNA, but that's just a lie they tell themselves to make themselves feel better about dating their cousins. That summer, my time was up. The Battle of Manhattan. Minor skirmishes that lead up to me fulfilling the great prophecy after a week and a half of all-out war. Trying to hold the city, and Olympus against the Titan's king's army. The gods were busy fighting their own titan, Typhoon, to help us. I didn't eat or sleep. It was all fighting, blood and screaming. Monster and dead demigods, and sleeping mortals until I ended it. Slicing invocations on my inner arms and letting Kronos kill me, not just a blood sacrifice, but burning my very soul in hope of giving the gods, all the gods, enough power to win. Kronos retreated deep into Luke, and Luke slit my throat and then killed himself. I was dead, and then death brought me back. I thought I would never be that scared again. I was wrong. I went back to Hogwarts, ignoring the memories and the guilt of things I never thought I would have to live with, and was placed in the Tri-Wizard tournament. Dragons, yawn. I'd fought hydras at 10. The lake? I was a child of Poseidon. I could breathe underwater. Then Voldemort rose, using Cedric's blood, not my own, because I wouldn't give it up and Peter wasn't skilled enough to make me. Even though I was tied to a tombstone. This summer, however, was by far the worst. Gaia was rising, so Aunt Hera in all her infinite wisdom decided to wipe the memories of myself and Jason Grace, swapping us from Camp Half-Blood and Camp Jupiter. We rescued Thanatos and fought giants, before sailing in a ship that flew as well as sailed to Rome. Annabeth followed the mark of Athena and almost fell into Tartarus but didn't. I spun her around until the webs tangled around me instead of her, and when she tried to stop me from falling I made her swear on the sticks to not let go of the shelf of rock until someone came to help her up. She did, and I let go, falling into the depths of Tartarus. The hell for monsters, and I had to because she couldn't hold on for long enough for us both and someone had to close the doors. I won't speak of what happened down there, or how I survived. I couldn't even think about it yet, but I cut the chains anchoring the doors and caught a ride out. Straight into the final battle against Gaia in Greece. We won. It isn't the apocalypse, so obviously we won, but Gaia decided in all her intelligence and glory decided to shove all of her power and all of the power of Kronos into me. If she was going to lose, I was going to die too. Annabeth linked her head to mine to keep me stable and later fed me an apple. It saved me, but it killed her. That was last night. My head was still reeling and my body still ached, not only from the fight but the horrible crying fit I threw when I was finally alone. Until Dad found me, that is, and held me until I could breathe. As fucked up as the relationships in my family were, he was there when I needed someone to take care of me for a change. "See ya," Sirius said in a gruff, sleep-filled voice. "What are you doing in here?" I couldn't sleep and Mrs. Weasley just kept talking. I slurred. He noticed the booze and instead of taking it away from me, placed it within reaching distance and popped me up on the bed. The world swimming violently as my feet left the solid surface. "There we go," he said, pressing a kiss to my hair. "It's okay." "No, it's not," I muttered. I told Mrs. Weasley something I probably shouldn't. "And what was that, Cub?" he asked with a small chuckle. "Cub." He called me Cub because that's what Remus called me because of his wolf. "The truth," I said honestly, before passing out. Deep in my back pocket was the last words Annabeth decided to share with me, because of course she had to leave me a note. "Seaweed brain, when you wake up, I'll be a story in your head. Make it a good one though, because it was, it was the best. I'm sorry that I'm being so selfish, but fuck it and fuck blood. You're my big sister, and you aren't going anywhere. This isn't your fault, and don't you dare feel guilty because you deserve to live and it's someone else's damn turn. Love always, wise girl. XOXO. Ouch, feels and much sadness. What did you think? Cookies to whoever can pick out the quote. Review, pretty please. Chapter 2 Disclaimer. I own nothing. J.K. Rowling and Rick Riordan are both responsible for the two wonderful series. I just like to play with them. Chapter 2. If it wasn't for the fact that I was blessed with the ability to metabolize alcohol without a hangover, the amount that I drank should have had me paying worship to the porcelain god. Instead, I woke up warm with a bundle of black fur cuddled up to me. When Sirius noticed that I was awake, he began licking my cheek until I shot him a tired half-hearted smile and pushed him away. I skipped breakfast and had a shower, desperately trying to avoid Mrs. Weasley. I was scared that she wanted to talk and talking hurt. Hades, right now thinking hurt, even breathing was hard. Still, I dressed in jeans and my Camp Jupiter shirt and got to work dusting one of the old rooms in the house. Moving from room to room, changing the water when it was dirty and scrubbing away the grime. "Molly's been ranting all day," Remus said, jumping me out of my head. "I hear you got drunk last night." He came and sat on the floor next to me. "The girl that's been like my little sister since I was 9 years old died the night before the last," I said calmly. There's a method, okay." He looked intrigued. "And what exactly is this method?" he asked curiously. "You spend the night trying to drown your pain and guilt in the bottom of a bottle, and then the next morning you get up, and you do something constructive. I said, scrubbing viciously at a particularly stubborn piece of dirt. It doesn't matter how much it hurts, or how much you want to just lay down and die, you don't. You pick up the pieces and keep going. That's not really fair, he pointed out. I snorted. No, it's not fair, I said lightly, but it's just the way that it is. Does that satisfy your well-meaning adult intentions in snooping? He froze and then smiled softly. What makes you think that I'm snooping or here is, he started. A nominated representative of the collective adult's nosy concern? I cut him off. I won't tell you not to bluff. You wouldn't be a marauder if you didn't. Just don't expect me to believe it. Clever girl, he said, shooting me a smile with a rare hint of wolfishness in it. You do know that I wasn't just here because they asked me to find out. I do care about you. Don't sound so surprised, and I know you care. I care too, and that's the reason why they sent you, I said blankly. If you want to go and tell them what you found out, you can. And what if I don't? He asked, grabbing the hand that was almost damaging the paint because I was wiping so hard. What if this just stays between you and me? I shifted so I was sitting facing him. Then I might actually begin to trust you, I said, almost cursing myself for my seemingly new habit of speaking without thinking first. You don't trust me? He asked, looking slightly hurt. I don't trust anyone, I admitted. Trusting people with your life, I can do that. I trust you like that, along with a lot of others in this house, but my secrets? You can always tell someone something, but you can never take it back. Not completely. Do you have many secrets? He asked, amused. Don't we all? I replied as a non-answer. He didn't leave. We stayed and he picked up a spare cloth and he helped. It was nice to not be alone, but not have anything expected of me either. Unfortunately, when it was time for dinner, he made sure that I followed him and I took a seat in between him and Sirius, as far away from Mrs. Weasley as I could. Fred and George teased me. Ron chatted about the canons, Hermione lectured, and Ginny and I talked about what it had been like living here while I was in the States. Not that they knew that, to them I still lived my aunt and uncle, when in reality I couldn't even remember their names, and then Sirius asked the million-dollar question. I'm surprised at you, Sia. I thought that you'd be demanding to know all about Voldemort by now? He asked me. I snorted, a sound that was barely heard over Mrs. Weasley's shrieks of fury and Fred and George's angry complaining about him not telling them anything, even though they were of age. And this is why I didn't bother asking, I said, shaking my head. That made them stop. What do you mean? He's offering to tell you everything, Ron said in surprise. Blimey, Sia, I thought that you would take the opportunity. You're just children, and nobody is being told anything, Mrs. Weasley yelled again. I felt a bitter smile crawl over my face. The words of Mr. D popping through my head, that's how they usually get killed. See, why bother? If they're going to be childish about it, there isn't any point because we won't learn anything real anyway, so there's not much point, I said with a shrug. It's not like it matters. And why doesn't it matter? A deep-voiced black man, Kingsley I thought his name was, asked. Because in the end Voldemort will find her anyway, Hermione said in a small voice. Yep, and then it's back to my usual system, I said, putting on a cheerful front. I'll see if anyone tries to kill me and then work backwards and find it all out anyway. Of course they'll people dead that could have been avoided by sharing, considering Voldemort's penchant for tricksy plotting and utter fuckery, but the majority of you all seem so adamant on risking it. Dumbledore said, the pink-haired girl said, looking down. Hate to break it to you, sweetheart, but we're not pieces on a chessboard. As much as they want to believe it, Dumbledore and Voldemort aren't the black and white kings. This is reality and there's too much free will for that, I informed them, but if you want to gather around like ducks around your chosen leader, I should probably warn you that it's duck hunting season. Get smart or get scarce. Otherwise I wouldn't want to be you when people start firing. And what do you plan on doing when you're finally confronted by you-know-who and his Death Eaters? Moody, the real one, asked curiously. Like I said, it's duck hunting season, I said sardonically. I'm going to get myself a big gun. Are you thinking about killing Death Eaters? Hermione asked sharply, staring at me as if she had never seen me before. No, I'm not thinking about it, I assured her, and I wasn't. I had already made a decision. Standing up, I left them to ponder about what I had said and sat in one of the old drawing rooms. These people were not unready, just so choosy. As a demigod, you can afford to be choosy because it's your choices and the way that you handle things that decides if you live or you die. We learned that from a very young age. You told Hermione that you weren't thinking about it, Fred said, drawing my attention. My head jerks up and I gaze at the twins standing in the doorway. But that's only because you'd already made up your mind, George finished. You really are going to try to kill them all, aren't you? I blew out a sigh and figured out how best to explain this one. There was no judgment as they looked at me, just calm. Am I going to try and kill the domestic terrorists that run around raping, killing, torturing and mind-raping people because of a superiority complex, or am I going to try and kill the psychotic, hypercritical bastard with a god complex and a big mouth? I asked rhetorically. They waited patiently. Yes. To which? They asked together. To both, I said, devoid of any emotion. Some people downstairs would say that don't deserve that and should go to prison, they replied, tilting their heads in contemplation. Boys, I bet you 10 gallons that there is a mass breakout before the end of the year, I said finally. Did I do good? Did I? Review and let me know. I'm trying not to make her too mopey to be any fun later. Not sure who the pairing should be. Gods and Goddess only if you have a suggestion. Review. Chapter 3 Disclaimer. I own nothing. Warning, strange logic ahead. As if that's new for my fix lol. Chapter 3 I didn't know how Sirius was surviving. I had been in that house for less than 2 weeks before school, and I was ready to go mad. Dumbledore sticking him somewhere safe and quietly out of the way, it was almost as if the man was asking for trouble. I wondered what I would do when we got back to the dorms. I was still waking up with nightmares every night, and that was if I could sleep at all. I didn't sleep well alone. I was thankful for my Padfoot-shaped security blanket. The ride to Hogwarts really wasn't that interesting. There was Malfoy, who with all his talk of superiority didn't realize that he was several rungs down on the food chain than me, just in skill and sheer determination alone, and God blood aside. What was really interesting was the Toad Woman in pink from the Ministry and her fancy little speech. I've had enough teachers that weren't really teachers, just monsters, to know that even if the woman wasn't a monster, she was a total psycho in the making. Me ma'am didn't want me to come back, Semius admitted as we were all standing in the common room. It was mainly because of Usia and Professor Dumbledore. You don't believe me then, do you? I said, my eyes sliding closed in frustration. If we just had proof, maybe if you could just tell us how Cedric died, he urged. My eyes shot open and I threw him a venomous glare. Why, are you sleeping a little too soundly? I said, my eyes darkening in fury, because if you had seen what I had, you wouldn't be. The ground tremored so lightly that nobody noticed, but I did and took a deep breath trying to calm down. So there is no proof, the boys sneered to the people assembling. You really are off your rocker, like the prophet said. I gave a small dark laugh. Honey, I wouldn't wipe my ass with the contents of that rag. They print whatever the minister tells them to, and the minister wants to play pretend and stick his head in the sand and hope it will all go away when really all he's doing is lining himself up for a good ass reaming. I brushed him off. Me ma'am and the prophet are right, you stay the hell away from me, Potter, he said, taking a step back. I however was tired and didn't want to go through this every day. Later sure, I said firmly, but you wanted to have this fight, so let's have this fight. Bottom line, one day you're going to be in a dark world where the people you love are in constant danger from Voldemort when you were warned full well it was coming, and when you ask yourself, how did the world get this bad? I want you to look back and remember the answer. And what's that? He demanded, nostrils flaring. You were a good little sheep, I replied scathingly. I am not a sheep, he roared. I didn't raise my volume to get my point across, I didn't have to. I had the attention of the whole common room without even trying. The prove it, I retorted, forget what the prophet says. Forget your mother's options. Hell, I don't care if you don't automatically believe me, just for the love of magic, use your brain. Think about what you've seen and match it up to what you heard, just think for yourself. He drew his wand at that point and Ron got to execute some of his sparkling new prefect authority. I went upstairs, got changed and tried to go to bed. I wasn't very successful. What little sleep I did have was plagued by memories and nightmares. Fire was the first thing I noticed. I was standing in camp and the field in front of me was full of it. Rows and rows of bodies wrapped in shrouds burning. My chest tightened and I couldn't breathe properly. My eyes prickled with tears, but I knew I couldn't let them fall, not now, not here. Not at all. Other demigods stood around me in various forms of grief, and the wind blew the smell of multiple bodies burning in harmony. The whole camp would smell like that for weeks, and I wouldn't be able to get the stink out of my hair. Crack. People started running and screaming as the ground started shaking and fissuring apart. Whole blocks giving way, leaving nothing but darkness. Not there. I couldn't go back there. Panic swallowed me whole and I trembled in desperate fear. Come down and play, the spirit of Tartarus crooned. The ground crumbled, and blackness enveloped me. I fell weightlessly back into the black. Annabeth's dead body half hanging out off the edge, the only thing I could see on the surface. I shot up, stifling a gasp and forcing my breaths to be as even as I could while I crept into the bathroom. Locking the door, I still didn't let my legs drop me down to the tile like they so desperately wanted to, but padded my way over to the sink. The worst thing about demigod dreams is that you never know what's just a dream, just a nightmare, and what is an omen of things to come. I looked at myself in the mirror and almost cringed. I was as pale as Nico actually, because of my long stint without sunlight. With my long raven hair settling in tangles around my hips. The sea green of my eyes that usually shone like shiny jewels were now dull and lifeless. Black circles were underneath them. I was still unnaturally thin, almost skeletally so, except I had put on a few pounds in the 2 weeks recovery before school. Great. Dressing, I found myself in the kitchens, eating an unhealthy breakfast of pancake with waste quantities of maple syrup and cream. Or rather maple syrup and cream with some pancake. Either way it was good for fattening me up, as the house elves had demanded I eat more and visit them so I can put on more weight. See, a Potter isn't beings healthy, Dobby lectured, shaking one of his slightly crooked fingers. No use be coming backs for fattening ups. I nodded and played as if I was cowed. I didn't mind the elves. They were nice and they didn't ask inconvenient questions, even if they were excitable. When I left to collect my timetable, I wanted to let my head slump and bang into the table. Snape, Trelawney, and that Umbridge woman all in the same day. What did I do to deserve this? It was a Monday, for God's sake. The day, of course, went just as badly as I envisioned it. I told the divination teacher she needed to get her inner eye some glasses, spent the double lesson of potions being derided and snarked at, and got detention in defense. To be fair, she did say that Cedric's death was an accident. I was a nutjob, insulted Remus, and said the only good defense teacher we'd had was the one possessed by Voldemort. I did well. I ignored most of that stuff until I realized that she was going to spend the next year making us read a book that had nothing to do with learning to defend ourselves and everything to do with learning to avoid situation where defense is necessary. Now I had a week's worth of detention, and Professor McGonagall, in addition to being very disappointed, said that I should shut up and let her get away with it. I heard the thunder rumble outside of the window and figured that was Uncle Zeus's way of telling me, don't you dare show that mortal more respect than me. No problem, Uncle, I really didn't intend to. If I couldn't keep my mouth shut around people who could incinerate me, or turn me into some sort of rodent and run me over with their Harley, not to mention a litany of other really creative forms of punishments, the Toad Lady can deal. Detention certainly wasn't going to hack it. So what's the plan? Ron said, as he and Hermione walked next to me. Plan? What plan? I asked, confused. The plan to deal with the Toad. I mean, this is totally outrageous, Hermione complained. This is our owl year and we could fail due to her incompetence. We need to do something, or she has to go. Rebel, I commented lightly, what makes you think that I have a plan? Why'd I have to be the one with the plan? They both looked at me impatiently. Because you're the one she's targeting, Ron pointed out. She is conspiring to ruin Hermione's perfect OWL's score. I say that makes it her problem, I said before turning to Hermione, or in light of that, we could just throw you at her. Not funny, she huffed as Ron and I laughed. It kind of is. Anyway, I don't have a plan, I reaffirmed, unless you count spending the rest of the year pissing her off so badly her head explodes a plan. Sometimes you're really vindictive, Ron said appreciatively. Why do you think I wanted her to come up with the plan? Hermione snorted seriously. Trust me, honey, vindictiveness runs in the family and I'm the nice one, I said surely, listening to them gasp in amusement. There, yet another chapter done. It kind of just flows right out of my fingers. Now, review me or I'll tell Hermione that you're ruining her owl's score and throw you at her. Chapter 4 Disclaimer. I don't own anything, only the plotline actually belongs to me. I really need to write disclaimers before I begin writing. Writing them all at once sucks. Especially when there's 8 more to go. Wish me luck and enjoy the story. Chapter 4. I didn't end up actually going to detention. Mainly because I was kidnapped, but how do you say no when your cousin asks you to make sure he doesn't accidentally crash his sports car, which is also the sun, into the planet and kill all? Which was how I found myself in the front seat of his Maserati Spider with tunes cranking. See, this is so much better than detention, he crowed in amusement. I totally would have called him on bullshitting his excessive tiredness. Some god of truth he was, but he had showed me how to use the mist to make it look like I was in detention rather than doing something better with my time. So right, I said, nodding and almost feeling lighter than I had in days, but I thought that you weren't allowed to hang with Demigod's cousin? He laughed. After that thing with Gaia, you're kind of exempt. Like a loophole, so you should expect more of us to visit and stuff, just because we can, he explained, smiling. Dare I say it sunnily, but that wasn't the only reason I picked you up. And why else did you pick me up? I asked before snapping my mouth shut, wanting to stuff the words back in my mouth. To give you a physical, of course, he said, sending a smoldering gaze my way. I laughed and hit him in the arm, which in hindsight, doing that while he was still driving the sun may not have been the smartest idea. Your sister is right, you are an idiot, I said easily. There was a glimmer of sadness in his eyes even though he was smiling. I blinked and it was gone. Which sister? He retorted. All of them, I answered cheekily. Burn. Can't burn what's already too hot to touch, but you're still getting that physical, he said, raising an eyebrow at me, daring me to naysay. Not that kind of physical, I said to him, still keeping up the banter. You're not that lucky. And don't I know it, still, Apollo said, wrapping his hand around my wrist using only his forefinger and his thumb. This isn't healthy, or sexy, and we have to get you back to your bootylicious self. Oh my gods, I cried in horror, almost giggling. I don't ever want to hear the word bootylicious come out of your mouth ever again. Bootylicious, I said, smirking as I cringed. Bootylicious, bootylicious, bootylicious. No, stop it, I cried, the tiniest baby laugh slipping out of my mouth. He gasped. Was that a laugh? Was it? He asked over the top. I think it was, but I'm not sure. Come on, you can do better than that. Bootylicious. I shook my head again. That little piece of happiness had burned coming out. Eventually that would go away. I just had to stay strong. Annabeth would forgive me. She would want me to be happy again. On another less depressing note, I did end up getting the physical. No, not like that, you pervs. He fixed me up and then told me to meet him every night for the week when I was supposed to be having detention, so he could heal a little bit more without overloading my sensitive body so soon after its original power slam. So I had something fun to look forward to each night. I told him about the room that I had found soon into my first year of Hogwarts. On the 7th floor there is a room that appears when you walk past it 3 times, and is whatever you need while you do so. Detention was officially replaced with archery. Apollo was determined to teach me, even if I was only able to hit things 3 feet behind me and slightly to the left. On a joint note, he now knows not to stand there anymore. Professor? I asked, holding up my arm with a smirk in umbiches, the new school favorite slur, class. She ground her teeth in irritation. I had been asking frequent and pointed questions that worked on the knowledge of Voldemort's return and her capability as not only an educator or a witch but as a functioning bipedal. There was a betting pool on when she was going to snap. What now, Miss Potter? She asked in her saccharine sweet voice. I was just wondering what it takes to be a qualified defense teacher, and I thought you would be the best person to ask, I said in a blasé tone. Obviously, as our teacher, you would have to get some sort of degree in education or apprentice under a more experienced professor. Which did you do? We're reading now, she said, irritated. I raised my hand. But Professor, I really wanted to know, I continued. I thought that with your opinion that the ministry and the minister is everything good and holy in the world, that they wouldn't hire such an unqualified person in such a crucial area, especially since you were only in administration before and have no practical experience. So which was it? Critical area, Potter. There are professionals trained to deal with threats, should any arise, and there certainly isn't anything so severe that you would need to know anything to advanced, she said, latching onto another topic to avoid answering the question. What about Sirius Black? I asked, catching her in a trap of her own making. The ministry are making it clear that he's at large and so dangerous that the school was swarmed in Dementors. I thought that you and your little friends thought he was innocent, she sneered, forgetting the faux sweet tone for a second before controlling herself. Are you admitting your lies? Considering I've seen Peter Pettigrew, once in third year where he admitted being my parent's secret keeper and the second where he was resurrecting Voldemort, I said, ignoring her screeching of lies and the flinching of my classmates, but you don't believe that he is, so what's your excuse? Enough, she shrieked, detention. How many times have I told you not to tell lies? Then I'll refrain from complimenting you, I said in a bored tone. She went from red to a puce color and I thought for a moment I was mission complete and her short-sighted mind was going to short-circuit all over the floor. Get out! Get out! Get out! She screamed in a fit. I smiled wanly at her. Of course, I replied, standing and putting my bag over my shoulder, but Professor, you didn't answer my questions. She let out a wordless scream of fury and I turned and walked away victorious. On the walk to see Professor McGonagall I wondered if it was making any difference. Again, Potter? She said aghast as I knocked on the open doorway of her office. I think you ought to get used to it, I said to her, plopping down on a seat, because I'm not going to stop. She sighed and poured herself a scotch. Taking a deep drink, she turned back to me. Oh dear, I've driven the professor to drink. I told you to keep your head down, she said, frustrated. Why? Why keep getting yourself in detention and making a scene? I observed her for a moment before deciding to tell her the truth. Because this is more important. I'm doing something that has to be done, I said confidently. Get yourself in trouble? You really are your father's daughter, she said, taking another swig. Yes, I am, I thought in agreement. Both of them. No, I'm doing one better. I'm not just pissing her off, I explained carefully. That just happens to be an extremely pleasant side effect. I'm asking questions. I'm asking questions that her and the ministry can't answer. I do this in class in front of my peers, and soon with the Hogwarts gossip mill the whole school is asking these questions. And then they talk to their families, who talk to their friends, and soon you have a whole community asking what's going on. Smart, but you don't fear the backlash of the resentment from you housemates for losing all those points, and with it the house cup? She asked intelligently. Surprisingly good question, I said, watching her let out a snort at my words. I'll tell the people that confront me about it the same thing I'm going to tell you. Do you know what the house cup is? It's a hunk of flashy gold that shows which house was most easily manipulated that year. You weren't always so cynical, were you? She asked softly. You fought at the last war. You know that this is going to get bloody before it ends. The truth hurts, and before it's over you're going to have to learn to cut your losses, whether it's your 15-year-old silliness or your pride, I answered in a tired tone. I just want people to think for themselves. Ah yes. I've heard the gossip from your housemates and from the order, and I like to hope I'm not a sheep or a duck, she said, smiling grimly, though I'd like to know, what's the difference? I like to think that you're far too clever to be either of those things, Professor, I stated honestly. The difference between the two is people go duck hunting for fun, and if you wait long enough you don't have to kill a sheep, because they'll walk into a slaughterhouse all on their own. True. Miss Potter, I never usually say this to someone sent to my office for bad behavior so often, but I want you to know that I am extremely proud of your maturity, she stated, and to let you know that if my drinking habits get around the school, Umbridge will be the least of your problems. Now off you go. I look forward to it, I said, sending her a two-fingered salute teasingly. She just looked at me for a moment before downing the rest of her glass and going for a refill. I should probably point out that this is a story with Greek and Roman gods in it, and that there will be some unusual pairing and romantic interests. What with Zeus marrying his sister Hera, then having his daughter Persephone with his sister Demeter, who marries his brother Hades, you get the gist. Just a heads up. Chapter 5 Disclaimer. I own nothing. Warning for unique family bonding. Still no pairings decided. Chapter 5. After that enlightening conversation with the good professor, whenever I was sent to her office I would quietly do my homework and tell everyone that she spent the hour railing at me. The good news was that I was finally getting through to people. There were just too many holes to poke at in the ministry rendition of events, and people were asking questions. Classes trudged onwards and I found myself in a state of, not happy, or even okay, but somewhat less than devastated. I put on a good face and would continue to do so. Until it wasn't an act anymore. What happened to Apollo? I asked one night as I saw Dad waiting for me in the come-and-go room, as the elves called it. It had taken the shape of a luxurious indoor pool. I began striping off until I was down to my Victoria's Secret bra and undies and hopped in the water. He and Hermes pulled a prank of Hera and now they're being lectured. I figure that I'd come keep you company, he said, swimming over. The water was lovely and calming. Just what I needed. You'd think they'd learn how not to get caught by now, I said ruefully, swimming over and giving him a hug. We settled down onto the bottom of the pool, floating next to each other. Was it at least good? I asked, curious. He nodded with a grin. You aren't sleeping well, he said, turning my face to stroke the shadows under my eyes carefully. I can't seem to stay asleep, or get to sleep in the first place, I admitted, knowing that lying wasn't going to do me any good when the evidence was so clear. Nightmares? He asked carelessly. Sometimes, memories mostly, I corrected. I'm fine though. You try so hard all the time, it must be exhausting, he commented. I could help you sleep if you like, I'm fairly sure I can wear you out. His arm slung itself around my waist, and my curiosity was piqued. And how exactly do you plan on doing that? I asked, wondering if it would work. There was a pause, and then I realized exactly where on my hip his hand was placed. Can we just pretend that I never asked that question? I said hurriedly as he laughed. Definitely not, I think you need a practical demonstration, he said, pulling me closer. I elbowed him in the stomach playfully. Dad, I whined, you know I'm just going to blame lack of sleep for that comment. You know I mean it though, not because I'm messing with you or because I want to get into your pants, he said softly. I do love you very much. I held in a sigh and fought to find a way to respond to that, because nothing is ever simple or normal in my family. It was always totally and completely fucked up beyond belief. I know you do, and if you want to flirt with me or try to get somewhere with me, I say hey, go ape, I said, being surprising truthful. I'm not saying I'll reciprocate or say you'll get in there, but if you or hell, the whole of Olympus wants to give it a go, then I won't try and make you stop. I just won't make any promises. Are you saying there's a chance? He asked, his eyes so like mine gaze at me, a mix of hopeful and possessive. I'm saying what will happen will, and I won't bitch and moan moral dilemmas if it does, I told him frankly. Well then, he said with a bright smile, I better get started on making you like me more. How about gifts? Are you going to shower me in shiny trinkets? I asked, amused. No, well sometimes I might not be able to help myself, but for now something that you will actually get excited about, he said with a lavish grin as he said the word excited. I'm going to teach you to teleport using the water in the air. I was prepared to tell him that he should get to hopeful, but the ability to teleport in and out of Hogwarts at a whim. Yeah, I was currently hugging him and bouncing up and down in glee. It was, unfortunately, really hard to learn. Or rather, it was hard to do until it clicked exactly what I was supposed to do, and then we were teleporting all over the world for kicks. When I went to bed I was so exhausted that I couldn't even wake up when nightmares plagued my dreams. See ya, it's time for breakfast, Hermione said, shaking me lightly. I groaned blearily and sat up. 7 o'clock, I didn't believe it. It wasn't exactly peaceful sleep, but it was sleep nonetheless, and over what I had been dealing with, I'd take it. Of course my semi-good morning was ruined the second I picked up the paper. Professor Umbridge, Hogwarts High Inquisitor. I didn't know exactly what that was, but I got the feeling that by this time next week, if I somehow made it so the paper read, Professor Umbridge, Hogwarts High Inquisitor, found dead, I don't think anyone would be anything other than thankful. Like she needed more power to be an interfering bitch. Come on, time for care, I sighed, pulling Hermione from her rant and Ron from his dark grumbling. When I saw the short pink-clad figure I knew that I should have traded my bacon for a liquid breakfast, and by liquid I mean tequila. Hello, I'm Professor Umbridge, she said in sickly sweet tone, holding a pink piece of parchment in her hands. I'm here for your inspi. Whatever else doubtlessly annoying this was about to come out of her toad mouth was interrupted with a herd of unicorns swarming me, and steered me into the center of their herd, all chattering excitedly. Lady came to visit, one of the foals nickered, bumping against my leg. Although longed to have a proper conversation, I had to keep my multilingual abilities to myself, because gods know how bad it was when it came out that I could talk to snakes. Yes, hello, I said in a warm, friendly tone, and how are you all today? Professor wanted to take us to meet foals. You are not a foal, lady. One of the mothers admonished. No, I answered quietly, petting them and gently undoing tangles in their manes. Are you having fun? They all started to say things at once. The younger ones were excited and the others appropriately weary. The woman is good, she'll not let any harm the herd, the leader said with authority. I paused to think of how to reassure them that I wouldn't either. Ditto, I answered. Miss Potter, what are you doing? Umbridge demanded, stalking forwards. The female closest to her reared on her hind legs and kicked her feet at her furiously. "Stay away from my foals," she demanded. Trading a conversation with unicorns for one with some thing far less intelligent, I replied, not looking at her. "You know unicorns are good judges of character. They can't stand evil." I could hear the stifled giggles and someone whispering, "Ooh, burn," under their breath. You, she spluttered in fury, swelling with anger. "Professor Grubby Plank, do you mind if I stay the next period?" I asked her, ignoring the other woman. "I haven't got a class." "You have defense with me next," the toad bellowed, turning a purple color. The herd was laughing and issuing words of encouragement like this was an episode of Dr. Phil or Jerry Springer. "Class implied that we're being taught something," I snorted, "but I suppose technically you're right. I'll rephrase. I have nothing important to do next period." "Detention," Umbridge snarled, practically spitting mad by this point. "Again?" I sighed in a bored tone before I made myself pleasant. "You know, Professor, your face is quiet purple. I'd worry if I were you, but then you should be glad that you've finally found something that matches your cardigan." She squawked with rage and stormed off, the Gryffindor section of the class and even a few Slytherins bursting into hysterical laughter. "Oh," I said, pretending to be puzzled, "is the inspection over?" "Unicorns, sorry, I just couldn't help myself. Umbitch is really in for it, isn't she? Stupid toad. Review and tell me what you think. Support the bashing of Umbridge." Chapter 6 Disclaimer. I own nothing, except if you laughed at any point in this story, your soul is now property of Hades. You know where to go to retrieve it. Anyway, on to the fun. Winking face. Chapter 6. I did in fact stay with the herd next lesson, and Professor McGonagall was sent to fetch me. Such a shame that she had to wait until her own classes were over to do so. At which point she marched me up to the headmaster's office, then proceeded to throw him out and use his pensive to make me show her Umbridge losing every verbal match she engaged with me, with a glass of scotch in her hand and laughing uproariously. 50 points to Gryffindor, she said when we popped out of the pensive and she returned my memories to me. She shuffled me out of the office, still laughing more merrily than I had ever seen before, and I walked past the surprised old man that studiously avoided my gaze. Guilt, or stupidity? I tossed up between the two. Internally I shrugged. Professor Dumbledore would get over it eventually, and I couldn't be bothered trying to figure it out. I have better things to do than wonder over an old man's guilt. I had enough of my own to deal with. "So why did the unicorns like you so much?" Pavarti asked me as I brushed out my hair that night. "I'm good with horses," I replied, because the answer, "My father is the god of the sea and created horses so they like me and have an annoying tendency to call me princesses," really wasn't going to cut it. "But they're not horses," she said, scandalized. "They're unicorns." As if I had somehow forgotten. "And do you know what a unicorn is?" "It's a magical horse with a horn on its head," I said truthfully. Then I shuddered. Just never tell them that. They then started to talk about boys, which was where I tuned out because what could be referred to in only the loosest terms as boy problems, where just no-go is the unicorn topic. Time for detention, I thought to myself, snapping my fingers and causing the mist to make Umbridge think that I was serving detention while I skipped off to the come-and-go room. I probably should have checked to see what foul thing that the bitch had magic me doing so that I could have any idea what she was talking about if she brought it up, but I didn't really want to know. Or care. As it turned out, I didn't care about a lot these days, Annabeth. My heart clenched painfully. When I came in, Dad and Hermes were playing cards. "What you playing?" I asked, dumping my school bag on the floor and taking the empty seat. "Texas Hold'em," Hermes replied, dropping his hand. "Here, delivery for you." He handed me a long-wrapped package that was less than a couple inches thick. I unwarped it to find a wooden box lined with navy velvet. Sitting there was a beautiful Japanese sword that was a replica of the sword that Riptide had turned into when it had passed into my ownership. Instead of Riptide written along the blade, there were rolling waves engraved in intricate detail. "Whoa, nice," I said, picking it up, only for it to turn into a simple silver hairpin. I slid it into my hair and read the card. "A demigod is always a demigod, wizarding war or not. Wizards rely on magic, doesn't mean you should. Here's a gift to help with that. Try not to die. Love, H." "It's from Hephaestus, sweet sword," Hermes said with a grin. I raised an eyebrow and looked at them both, wondering why my cousin had sent me a sword, apart from the obviously listed reasons. "You did say whole of Olympus," my dad chuckled, You didn't know that you hold a special place in the hearts of all the Olympian gods. Ah, I thought. In a way that's strictly not platonic. I asked, watching them both nod. Okay, I said, stealing their cards and beginning to shuffle. Wait a minute, even Aunt Hestia and Athena? Yep, and okay, that's it? Hermes said with happy grin, and just when I think I couldn't like you more. I did promise you could all try all you like, but I never said you were going to get anywhere, I said with a shrug. Money where my mouth is time, and all. They both leaned over and pulled me into a hug. So, are you playing? Dad asked as I placed the shuffled deck on the table. For drachmas, nah, boring, I said to them. They both got this grin that made me want to grin along with them. Strip poker it is then, Hermes said gleefully. I just shook my head and started to deal. Either of you cheat and you'll find my Jimmy Choos in your throat, via your ass. I threatened seriously before my tone changed to a light-hearted one. And then I expect a new pair of shoes, or those ones back, thoroughly clean. They both laughed. Pretty soon, it was almost time for the first trip to Hogsmeade on Halloween. Sirius had sent me a letter, signed Snuffles, to ask it I wanted to meet him there and catch up with the way Malfoy was. Running his mouth and dropping hints with all the subtlety of a 50-kilo anvil, I knew it wasn't safe. The letter I got back left me less than impressed with the man. You less like your father than I thought. It would have been the risk that made it fun for James. He'd written back to me. I was going to have words with him. So what are we doing in Hogsmeade? Ron asked as we walked out the gates. I moved us to where we wouldn't be overheard. I'm not going. I'm going on a trip to see Snuffles, I told them seriously. Are you in? And how do you plan on doing that? Hermione asked. I put out my arm and flagged down the night bus. Hopping on, I looked back at them both. In or out? I'm leaving now, I said, watching them get on behind me. One bumpy trip later and we were sneaking into number 12. Slap. Ow, Sirius cried as I slapped him in the back of the head. That's for trying to emotionally manipulate me, I said haughtily. Remus came in and let out a noise halfway between a laugh and a groan. What are you three doing here? He asked in a long-suffering voice. What, did you think that now I know where you both are I was going to leave you alone on today of all days? I said as if they were stupid, bitches please, and I brought my friends. Ron, Hermione and Jack. I placed a 2-liter bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey on the table while Hermione giggled. What, bitches please? When they're both canines, she said through giggles, it's funny. Who are you and what have you done with Hermione Granger? Ron asked with a grin. No language lectures. She punched him lightly in the arm. Now, I don't know about you but I think we should all sit down, listen to loud music, play dubious card games and get drunk in memory of my mama and papa, I said with a slightly scary smirk. Fucking Red's daughter, Remus and Sirius said, bursting into laughter at the exact same time. Does anyone even know you three are here? Remus asked, sitting down. I slipped McGonagall a note as we left. I defended myself. It said, gone to mourn parents with Uncle's Dark Wolf. Probably taking Bookworm and Ginger. Be back tomorrow dinner, latest. Love Snitch. XOXO. Nice code, huh? Fucking Lily's daughter, they said together. So there was my fun way of saying that I think that Lily was badass and not all mother hen-like and straight-laced like so many authors like to marry Sue female characters in stereotype. Review and feed my muse. She's starving here and on minimum wage. Chapter 7 Disclaimer. I own nothing, warning for flippant drug use. The beginning is more a fun chapter than a serious chapter, because we all know serious isn't serious. Chapter 7. I'm not sure if anyone else remembered what happened that night, but it was a haze of drinks, music with bad singing along, gambling and smoke. An ashtray sat on the table and a bong on the kitchen counter. The secret of keeping the inner wolf of a werewolf calm, a big bag of weed. Drunk, stoned Remus didn't mind sharing. He and Sirius were curled up half-naked on the couch. Hermione and Tonks were naked on a conjured mattress, the metamorph having walking in last night, her hair turning white in surprise and the expression, the fuck, on her lips. Later the fifth-year girl had scored. All the while Ron and I played chess on the floor 3 feet away, giggling and eating pizza. What? I heard Hermione yelp from the kitchen where I had just finished making bacon and egg sandwiches for the unfortunates that were driving to Hangover City. What? What? The last one was said with such disbelief that I almost dropped the plate. "I think that's my cue to go," Mr. D said from his position at the kitchen table, throwing down his last hand of cards. "You would have won that one," I commented, before he flashed out. Hermione chose that moment to come running into that kitchen with a blanket wrapped around her. "Why am I naked on a makeshift bed with Tonks?" she asked in a hushed whisper, as if she were afraid that someone would hear her. "You two had sex last night," I said bluntly. Her already wide eyes looked like they were about to pop out of her head and she looked caught in between shock and panic. "We what?" she asked, it coming out strangled. "You know, got it on?" I said, unable to stop myself from elaborating. "Did the dirty? The horizontal tango? Gave each other multiple great big rocking O's? Had night of naked leso wrestling?" "Well, that explains a lot," Tonks said cheerfully from behind Hermione, completely sky-clad. "Wish I could remember that. Does anyone happen to know what happened to my panties?" Hermione squeaked. "I pulled them into the living room, and woke up the boys." "So are you two not freaking out because waking up half-naked together is common, or you just have no shame?" I asked my makeshift uncles. They laughed. "I've been with Mooney since third-year cub," Sirius said, waving it off. "Not a big deal. I kicked them both in the shins." "That's for not telling me," I said crossly, and I knew that hug in the shrieking shack was a little too friendly. They laughed and Hermione shifted uncomfortably in Sirius's borrowed shirt. We ate and Ron lamented that he was the only one to behave. "Mum'd have a right heart attack, she would," he said, shaking his head. Tonks had gathered up all her clothes and stood. "I think I'll go have a shower," she said brightly, walking away and only almost tripping. I looked at a lost-looking Hermione and repressed a sigh. "You know I don't think she'll mind if you join her," I said to her. "It doesn't really matter if you want to rehash your memory of what happened, and if you freak out, which you shouldn't because there were no complaints last night, then you can just ask her to stop. I think the not remembering is what's bothering you at the moment." "I definitely need drink first, or a cone," she muttered with an undertone of anticipation in her voice, "or both." She toddled off to the kitchen and Ron stared at me with a slightly open mouth. "I think we killed good Hermione," he said finally. "I can't believe that one of my hot female best friends and a hot female metamorph got it on in front of me, and I can't bloody remember." The rueful tone in his voice made me laugh, Remus's comment making me pause for a moment before laughing even harder. "I know, that would not have been a sight worth missing," he had said in a slightly dazed voice. "Hey," Sirius said, poking him in the ribs with a teasing smile. "I'm allowed to look and appreciate," Remus defended. "Just touching is a no-go." "Unless we share," Sirius said carelessly, causing Ron to choke on his drink. "So it appears that mortal or human, my family will always be disturbed beyond all reason." We went back to school not long after we had all finished showering off the smell of booze and weed. Hermione and Ron were stoned, but that was just amusing. Especially seeing Hermione eat as much as Ron at dinner. McGonagall called us into her office and said in a calm voice that she understood that we wanted to go through such a troubling time together rather than alone, but we were not to do that again. I wonder if she would be so sympathetic if she ever found out what really happened. "So, what's the verdict?" I asked Hermione while our nosy dorm mates listened in. "Girls, a no or a go?" She laughed and flopped down on the bed. "I'm not sure about all girls, but I definitely would hop back into her bed, or shower, again," they said empathically. "Good times. I can't wait until Christmas." I then abandoned her to answer all of their inane questions, of which she dutifully answered all but the who. Time passed again, filled with godly visits, sneaking out to see my dogfathers. Now practically married to Sirius, Remus had been upgraded to godfather as well. Insulting Umbridge, and deifying all her ridiculous decrees with relish. Hagrid was back, with a giant little brother in tow. Hogsmeade again and winning the first Quidditch game of the season against Slytherin. On that note, fucking Malfoy. "You like the Weasleys' hovel? The stink must remind you of the smell of your mother," he taunted pathetically. "I'd hoped you washed, but certain things just never come off." I held George back while the other girls had Fred. I could see that all too soon Fred would become too much for the girls to handle, so I shoved away George and went at Malfoy, flipping him around until he fell and pressing my foot in between his shoulder blades so he was face down in the mud. "Potter," Umbridge yelled. The three of us were taken to see. McGonagall and the vicious harpy decided that her punishment wasn't enough and tried to take our brooms. I handed my firebolt to McGonagall. If you could send that back to the person who bought it for me, I'll get it back when I go home for the summer, I said before turning to Umbridge. You are not having it. I don't trust you not to jinx it or something else horrible. With that, and a lifelong Quidditch ban, I walked out. You have to do something, Hermione said as we reclined by the lake. We're learning nothing at defense. Death Eaters are going to pick us off one by one. She's right, Ron said. I wish we could get a teacher, a proper one. We could, Hermione said, contemplating as I dangled my feet in the lake. We could have someone else teach us, she continued. I listened to their obviously practiced conversation, being intentionally obtuse until Hermione just blurted it out. Stop playing with us, Sia. I know you know what we mean. We want you to teach us. We want you to teach us how not to die, she said passionately. I know that you know what I mean. You're a survivor, and I want to be able to live and to fight back. All right. I can teach you and Ron, I sighed in agreement. Plenty of this stuff won't be typical stuff that you learn in a Dada class though, and it won't be easy. I know, Ron said simply. Hermione and I don't think it should be just us though. We think that you should teach anyone that wants to learn. We all have a right to live. Before he said that last sentence I could have ignored them and refused, but he was right, and the many dead kids, dead demigods, that I had seen over the years flashed through my mind. Damn my heart and damn my guilty conscience. I don't think that anyone wants to learn from me, I said half-heartedly, knowing that if there's a will there's a way, and Ron and Hermione most definitely have the will. But, I added, seeing the looks of protest, I will agree to teach anyone that you get to come. They looked excited, and I found myself trying to plan out where to start. Years of teaching sword fighting classes at camp were going to come in handy. So maybe that's where I start. Stamina, because Hephaestus was right. The wizarding world relied on magic far too much. What did you think? The DA is pretty much obliterated as far as the canon concept of it goes, so sit back and enjoy. Comments and constructive criticism are welcome. Review. Chapter 8 Disclaimer. I own nothing. Finally up to the starts of the DA part, the bit that had been playing about in my head for ages and is actually the entire reason for the story. Chapter 8 agreeing to teach that one class was going to change absolute everything, and because of the way that it was being done, the older generations weren't going to know what hit them. We met in the Hog's Head, despite my protests. Somewhere off the beaten track, Hermione had said, and I wanted to sigh. Maybe some strategy lessons were in order too. Less people means more ability to eavesdrop. So, I called you all here to talk about the chance to learn some defense, some real defense, Hermione said as the group of 20 to 30 students sat quietly. What we're learning from Umbridge is nothing, and if we're going to defend ourselves against Voldemort, she said, forcing out the name, then we need to learn. And who's going to teach us? You? One of the Hufflepuffs sneered. I am, I said, stopping him short. If that's not okay with you, then leave, but Voldemort is back and you're going to need some real survival skills. Not to mention our owls, a Ravenclaw muttered. I'm not sure that it'll help you with those. I'll certainly try, but this will help you stay alive in a sticky situation like the World Cup, but worse, I said seriously. But what makes you capable of teaching us? The same Hufflepuff demanded. What have you done that makes you qualified? I wanted to laugh at him, because really, I had an impressive resume. Is it true you can do the Patronus charm? Someone asked me. I nodded. Third year she got rid of over 100 Dementors all at once, Ron said, not to mention the 60-foot basilisk in second year. In first year you saved the Philological Stone, Neville piped up. Philosopher's Stone, Hermione corrected, the Triwizard Tournament tasks, and last year, she really did fight Voldemort. Sia knows what she's doing, and we convinced her that everyone deserves a chance to learn. The only question is, are you in? What about Umbridge? Alicia asked, stopping the excited murmuring. When have I ever shown that I give a flying fuck about the Lady Toad and her rules? I said, tilting my head. She can do her worst, because more can she really do to me? We should, however, be prepared to keep quiet about this. I'll go to bat over it, but I would prefer if we didn't have to. Agreed, Ron said, so if you want to join, just sign your name up and we'll contact you with further details. An idea popped into my head for a second, and I knew that there was one more thing that still had to be said. This isn't going to something easy, I said, making myself clear. It might not always be as straightforward as learning a couple of jinxes, but I promise that it will be worth it. After that I stepped away and watched them all move forwards to sign, including 3 Slytherins. What are slimy Slytherins doing here? George asked as they finished signing. only just realizing that they were there. I wanted to bang my head against a wall. I'm assuming the same thing as you, I retorted. Not all Slytherins are evil, George. Peter was a Gryffindor, just remember that. Malfoy's a prick, but he isn't sharing a brain with all Slytherins everywhere. That would imply that he has a brain to being with, the girl with the light blonde hair said, tossing it over her shoulder. The other girl had shorter golden blonde hair that didn't touch her shoulders and chocolatey eyes. The boy that stood behind them reminded me of Nico. Italian, my mind supplied. Well, I like them better already, Ron commented. I was surprised Ron was so accepting. The girl that had spoken looked at him appraising. I'm Daphne Greengrass, that's Tracy Davis and Blaise Zabani, she introduced, and you're right. We're here the same reason as your friends. The Dark Lord is back and we all deserve the right to live. That you do. Welcome in, I said, holding out my hand and shaking their hands. Of course, when I got back to Hogwarts I had a double of McGonagall's scotch when she wasn't looking. All 4 houses represented, and looking to get along. The next day there was yet another educational decree. All study groups, teams, clubs, associations and/or extracurricular activities of 3 or more people are henceforth disbanded. Any and all of the aforementioned groups must have the permission of the High Inquisitor to continue. We're screwed, Hermione sighed desolately. I mean, we're doing it anyway, but we're still screwed. How did she even find out about it? Doesn't matter, it doesn't apply to us, I said with a happy smirk. And how do you figure that? Ron asked with a gleam in his eyes. Because we're not a group, team, club, association, study group or extracurricular activity, I said blandly. It's an elective class at best. Survival 101. You're bloody brilliant, Ron swore. Just wait until you see the classroom, I commented happily. The come and go room was one fancy classroom that would be equipped with absolutely everything we'd need. Breakfast was tricky, with everyone wanting to know what was going on. Only the Slytherins had any sense to not make a scene in the Great Hall, which even the twins admitted embarrassedly. Angelina, I said, pulling her aside, we have a meeting time. After dinner tonight, 6:30, can you get it around to the people you see? Tell them to meet in the room across the tapestry of the dancing trolls on the 7th floor and to wear something that they can run in. Sure thing, Sia, she said, nodding seriously. That night I was waiting in the room. It had taken the shape of the stadium at camp. People filed in and sat on the bleachers, all of them in appropriate clothing. I was happy to see. I'm glad to see that we're still doing this even though the ministry is trying to stop us, Pavarti giggled. I sent the all a smile. The ministry doesn't have a leg to stand on. This is an elective class, I said, moving to stand in front of them. I'd like to welcome you all to Survival 101. Is there any questions before we start? What is this place? Fred asked, looking around. It looks like an outdoor stadium, but we're in a room, so we can't be. The house elves call this the come and go room, I said, gesturing around. It becomes equipped for the seeker's needs. I wanted a place to hold class, suitable for said class, where no one can find us that isn't supposed to, and it gave me this. Wicked, someone said, as hushed whispers overtook the crown. Are we going to have a name? Ginny said, raising her hand. Hermione shook her head and answered for us. No, the whole idea of exempting us from the latest educational decree is the fact that we're not in any of the categories that were specifically banned, she said, sighing. If we had a name, then it would be cutting it to close. We could just go with 101, Luna said in a dreamy voice, when we want to talk about it outside of the room. I nodded, in approval. That's a good idea, I acknowledged. Any other questions? What is 101? Tracy said, raising her hand. It's a basic class, like the difference between 3rd year runes and 5th year, I explained. She nodded and relaxed a little more. Okay, first up, I said with relish, is running. I want you doing laps of the stadium. Next chapter is pure-blooded reactions. Don't you just love writing the stupid that comes out of the mouths of the magic dependent? Review. Chapter 9, Disclaimer. I own nothing. This is a figment of my muse's imagination. Read and enjoy. I know I enjoyed writing it. If you don't understand the later innuendo, you're probably too young to know. Chapter 9. Run. The annoying Hufflepuff that I had since learned was called something Smith, drawled. What good is running going to do us? I thought this was a defense class. I knew that I had to deal with this one idiot before I could properly get them into the idea that physical training is necessary. No, this is a survival class and running is very important for multiple reasons. I said, dismissing his ignorance. What do you do if you need to get away from something you have no hope of beating and is going to severely injure if not kill you? You run. Someone's hurt and they're going to die if you don't get there fast enough. You run. Are we seeing a pattern here? That's only 2 reasons, not multiple, Padama, Pavarti's Ravenclaw twin stated. Okay. Running raises stamina. If you can't block a spell you dodge, you should dodge rather than shield anyway, and if you don't have enough stamina you're screwed, I pointed out. Running raises your endurance, it makes you stronger, faster and generally thinner, toner and better looking. More stamina means that you can cast more spells for longer. So it's important, Ginny said with a nod. If you have more endurance than the person trying to kill you it'll save your life. I said bluntly, I have some very expensive nutrient potions and muscle promotion potions. It means you can get more out of less work, but if you think that it's beneath you then leave because I can't be bothered dealing with you. When do we take these potions? Blaze asked, raising his hand. Now, I answered. I want everyone to grab a green vial and a blue one. The blue one you take at breakfast with your meal and the green one you take once a day whenever you want. They're self-refilling, and if you lose them, your loss. If everyone could take the green one before we start and do some stretches before we start to run. How many laps are we going to do? Colin Creevy asked me. For today, just 3 and then we'll move on to something else, I said, nodding. They came forwards and took the potions and drank the one instructed. I lead them through some stretches and set them to running. By the 3rd lap of the stadium they were puffed out and out of breath, laying on the floor trying not to die. I made them get up, do some cool down stretches and got them to get into groups of 5 or so. What now? Hermione asked, her chest still heaving as she panted, out of breath. A set of targets appeared and stood a short distance away. Accuracy, I said to them. It doesn't matter if you have the biggest repertoire of high damage spells, if you can't hit your target it doesn't help you. I want you to line up, and send a basic color changing charm at the target. When you hit the center it will move further away every time it's your turn. Does everyone know the color charm? Yes, they shouted and got to work. It was actually a lot of fun. I went around giving people tips as they played competitively against each other. By the time it was over 2 separate showering rooms appeared and I told them to get cleaned up and go, before joining the girls in the shower. I'd never even thought of half that stuff, Fred said as he, George and I walked back to the common room. I thought it would be just learning a bunch of spells, and all. Nah, a bunch of spell might help a little but this is better, George said seriously. So Professor Potter, what's going on next class? I smiled at his mock deferential tone. There's going to be a first aid unit, a spells unit, situational awareness, strategy, obstacle courses, cooking unit, basic muggle identification, and magic 0 unit, I said pompously, before going back to normal. You know that I'm making all this up as I go along, right? Situational awareness, muggle identification and cooking. Fred asked. I'm not being like that, Git Smith, but how is all of this useful? Because when you're being chased by Death Eaters who have people in the ministry and you find yourself in some forest somewhere and you're starving and you're freezing to death, and you can't use magic because the moment you do underage trackers send up a flare. You want to live, I said simply. You want to be able to look around your surroundings and know how to make it harder for people to follow you. Food, what to eat, how to cook it and make it last. Not freaking out the muggles and knowing what the heck they're talking about is also a good thing. You've been giving this a lot of thought, George said thoughtfully. Yeah, well if you're going to do something this important, go big or go home, I answered as we came through the portrait. Only question is how often we should meet. I'll ask around but I think I speak for everyone when I say as often as we can, as long as we can, they said together. I went upstairs and found a gorgeous blue-eyed blonde in my bed wearing my enlarged Quidditch jersey. Coming to bed, sweetie? She asked with a teasing pout. Hey Aphrodite, I said with a smile, hopping on the bed and closing the curtains. Aphrodite, like my dad and every other person on the Olympian Council had supposedly started to love me, and when they told me that I didn't really take them seriously. They all had their own ways showing it, but she liked to come sleep in my bed, wearing my clothes and flirt. She'd hold me and give me cuddles to help me make it through another night. I did hope she didn't know exactly how much I appreciated it because I really needed the sleep, but she probably did. Hey honey, someone looks freshly showered. What I wouldn't give for my hair to dry instantly after a shower, she said saucily, even though I'm starting to think the gift of never getting wet is a curse of never getting wet. Innuendo dripped from her tone, and I knew that if I didn't play she'd be at it all night. I can get wet, I replied, slipping under the covers with her, if I will it. If you need some help convincing yourself to will it, the goddess of love and sex is in your bed and at your service, she purred the last bit out sensuously. I said as if I was thinking about it, no thanks, I have a headache. She giggled at my purposely false-sounding excuse and got under the covers with me and snuggled down. Love you, she murmured into my hair. I love you too, I told her, yawning. I know you do, she answered, but not how I want you to, not yet. It's okay though, you will one day. You'll love us all. We've got nothing but time. And with that slightly creepy and cryptic half-comment, I sort of wish I fell into a dreamless sleep. Sometimes I think that they forgot, not everybody lives forever. The next morning still carried some sort of feeling of success. I went down to breakfast and watched as my class covertly downed their blue vials with their breakfast. Even if they did look a little sore and achy, that was a good thing. It would tough them up and get them used to working through pain. The best part was the bucket of thick black ooze that I was relatively sure was tar got dumped on the bitch's head. Her furious shrieks at Peeves truly uplifted my heart and warmed my soul. Hey Sia, Hermione said, leaning her head on my shoulder and pretending as if she were tired. We all talked and after dinner we're meeting again. I hope you feel up to teaching. Whenever we can, for as long as we can. It was not Fred and George being sentimental or kind. It became the 101's mantra, and I was all too happy to help. So there's the start of the formerly known DA, which will now be referred to as 101. This isn't about Dumbledore or kids trying to piss the ministry off. Nobody likes an ass kisser. What do you think so far? Review and let me know. Chapter 10 Disclaimer. I own nothing. This isn't my sandbox, I just play in it. Chapter 10. You know I would pay to know how you keep getting in here, Remus said sleepily as I bounced on his bed with excitement after the class that night. He and Sirius were curled up together and mildly annoyed at being woken up. And here I came to tell you that I'm following in your footsteps, Uncle Mooney, and you sound unhappy to see me, I said in a pouting voice. So you're going to break the ministry decree, Sirius said, sitting up. Molly's in the middle of having kittens and writing you a letter to discourage you. On the other hand, I'm all for it. Hate to disappoint you, I said teasingly, but it isn't breaking the decree. And how did you manage to pull that off? Remus asked from his position laying down, with his eyes still closed. I thought to myself, what would wise girl do? And I did that, I thought to myself sadly. It doesn't fit the criteria, I said proudly. They can't give her the authority to stop a class. At the most she can inspect me, and then I'll just be boring for a day. I teach Survival 101. And what exactly is Survival 101? Sirius asked curiously. I then proceeded to tell him the 2 lessons I had given and the ideas I had. They both sat up intrigued as it bubbled out of my mouth. And they wanted me to teach them again the next night even though we aren't doing anything interesting yet, I said brightly. I teach after dinner on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays and all day Saturday at their request. They're really that interested? Remus asked in wonder. And there are 3 Slytherins participating too? How many are there? About 30 to 40, I said, counting in my head, and the come and go room makes an awesome classroom because it can become whatever you need. Are you going to pass your owls while doing all this extra work? Sirius asked me, surprising me actually. Hermione really wants this, and I really want this, so she'll make sure we pass our owls with flying colors or die trying, I said seriously. Ron had been completely right with what he'd said about Hermione. She's a bit scary sometimes, completely brilliant, but scary. Oh, not to mention these, I said, holding out a gallon. I told them that Hermione, Ron and I had charmed them. They warmed if activated, so we can cancel class or change the date. They can be activated if one of the 101s are in trouble. The writing will change to say whose coins activated and where they are. A few drops of blood and the equivalent to a magical GPS and we were all set. These are brilliant, Remus said in awe. All of this is so amazing. You can't tell anyone, I told them, not the Order or Dumbledore, nobody. Then why did you tell us? Sirius asked quietly. What do kids do when they think that they've done something amazing? Who do they tell? I asked them. They tell grown-ups. They tell the people that they want to be proud of them. Lacking Mum and Papa, who's the first person I'd tell? I was suddenly swept into a tight and meaningful hug. We are so proud of you. Sirius said as they attempted to crush me. I was okay though, this didn't compare to one of my half-brother Tyson's normal hugs, let alone the one I got from him when I was found after Harry stole away my memoirs. Now that put Hagrid to shame. Cool, so it's 3 in the morning and I have class to teach all day. Can I crash here for 3 hours? I asked with puppy dog eyes. Remus snorted and Sirius held open the blankets. I slid in the pre-warmed space, happy to see that they were both wearing pants. Best godfathers ever, I said happily. When I woke up to my alarm I quickly shut it off and gave the 2 sleeping forms a hug and a kiss on the cheek, leaving them a note telling them I'd gone. Teleporting to the empty bathroom in my dorm, I threw on some new clothes and had a quick IM with Tyson, realizing that I hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time that wasn't a god. I thought about going to visit tomorrow, but the state of my homework made me cringe, and be thankful for another little side effect of Gaia's nasty little trick. My dyslexia was gone. Like it had never been. I'd gone and waited in the common room, and after breakfast I set up the room. The stadium was there for our run, which had started to get easier, and then I taught them a few basic hexes and jinxes, correcting them where I could and inspiring confidence where necessary. There was a bit of Muggle first aid and how to light a fire without magic after that, and then, the tower. The tower was actually something that we had from camp. It was a tall tower that you had to climb up, jumping over spinning pieces and standing on poles that someone could pull out from under you if they tugged at the one that you were standing on from the other side. This is more for fun and physical training, in case you get stuck having to climb up or down somewhere tricky, I said, motioning to it once it had appeared. I want everyone in 2 even teams. Mix it up a little and try being with people that you don't know so well, or haven't met before. 2 people from each team get to climb up one of the 4 sides. If and when you fall, you're out. Next team member gets a go. First to get to the top and pull their team's colored disc wins. Losers do another 3 laps running. So we just have to climb up there and get the disc? Dean asked, looking up. Yep, everyone pick teams and then have your team pick a color, I said, watching them look at it again, nervousness clouding their faces. What if we fall? Luna asked me. Despite her general craziness, or perhaps because of it, I actually liked the girl quite a lot. There are cushioning charms on the floor, I assured her, but we will eventually get rid of those as you all get better. If you fall you get up, if something's wrong we'll fix it. And I suppose that you're going to stand and watch, Hermione said, her fear of heights coming out. I've got to put the discs up there, don't I? I said to her. I get to go first. They have one of these at camp though, so I have practice. On the downside, no cushioning charms, and that hurts like a bitch. Warning, if someone pulls from the other side, those poles up there can go right from under your feet. They finally picked teams' colors. One team was silver and the other was purple. I color charmed the bits of metal and nimbly worked my way up the tower. Grabbing the wooden platform and jumping to swing myself up, I placed the discs in the holes waiting for them and jumped down. Using my momentum and the outcropping objects, I landed on my feet in front of them, with them clapping and cheering for me. Thank you, I said, waving them away and blushing, but now it's your turn. On your marks, get set, go. They ran at the spiraling tower and I found myself wishing for a working stereo. Much to my surprise, a working stereo did in fact appear. I flicked it on and music blared through the room, upbeat. It took 3 rounds of everyone falling before the silver team won, hoisting her prized Luna Lovegood on their shoulders and cheering. I let out a small laugh and they disappeared into the showers. All right, purple team, 3 laps and you're free, I said, joining them for the run. This was a lot more fun than I had thought. Ouch, these people are crazy and irrational. They're also scared and competitive and determined, and as such they can and will become lethal. Voldemort is most probably screwed. Chapter 11 Disclaimer. I own nothing. This is just something to indulge myself in while I am out of internet and money. Anyway, enjoy. Chapter 11 Umbridge knew. Not who was involved, exactly what we were doing or where, but she knew we were up to something that she disapproved of. By the time that 2 weeks had passed, the class could do things that they had never even imagined trying. They could heal low-level wounds through either Muggle or magical means. Backflip and dodge like they were trained gymnasts or American cheerleaders. Accuracy and increased spell repertoire, not to mention the multiple uses for easy and household spells to incapacitate and cause severe damage. You're becoming an alcoholic, I commented, watching McGonagall down another scotch. Yes, well, I blame you. Not even your father and his friends caused me this much worry, she said stiffly. What is that woman even having you do in those detentions? I shrugged my shoulders. You know I have absolutely no idea, I said truthfully, probably nothing good. And how, pray tell, can you not have any idea what you do in detention every night? She asked, raising her eyebrows and looking resigned. Oh, I don't actually go, I said in a blasé tone of voice. Her glass is set down on the table and I look back down at my divination essay. Somehow I think that she'd notice that you aren't showing up, Professor McGonagall said, looking as if she couldn't work out whether she wanted to know or not. Yes, well, I cheat, I said, just as the bell went. Flashing her a smile, I stood and darted out of the door, hearing something that sounded suspiciously like a head thumping onto wood as I left. Oh, the joys of going to witch school. I didn't feel up to the crowd in the great hall, so I picked up some lunch and walked out towards the forest. There was low growling noise that seemed to be following me. After a few moments I stopped and turned. Hello, Artemis said, leaning against a tree. I smiled. I was wondering when you'd show up again, I said, smiling at her. She moved forward, wearing the body of a teenager about my age rather than her usually childlike form. Considering she was trying to do the same as the rest of the crazy Olympians of our family, becoming older wasn't a surprise. Want to hunt? She asked, licking her ruby lips. What is it with you and your crazy brother and your insistence that I need to learn to handle a bow? I said with a laugh. She smirked and shook her head. Yes, all that time wrapped around you. Teaching you to aim and fire correctly, Artemis said, throwing me an innocent look. I can't imagine why. I flipped her the finger. Where the bloody hell have you been? Hermione asked, taking in my messy hair and dirt-smudged skin. I briefly tried to decide on what to tell her and decided on a simplified version of the truth. I went to a nature party, I said neutrally, figuring that a hunting party that consisted of nymphs, stayers and a goddess of the hunt could be considered as such. Especially in the middle of the forest. A knowing gleam paraded itself through Hermione's eye and I wondered what she had come up with as an explanation to figure it out. So who are you sleeping with? She asked nonchalantly. Of course, she couldn't come up with something a little more interesting. Boring. My godfathers, I said deadpan. Watching her face turn several different shades of colors in sheer surprise, she covered her feelings by burying them in curiosity. Are they good at what they do? She asked. Ron slapped his hand to his face. Spikes of ginger hair moving in the airflow created by the momentum. Hermione, she was lying to you, he told her, though it came out a little muffled due to his hand not moving. She flushed. I'm not sleeping with anyone, though several people are trying to convince me otherwise, I said, serving up some gossip for having the patience to put up with me for as many years as she had. Anyone we know? Hermione questioned. I briefly thought about what disaster that would be and felt as if I had missed being hit by a speeding train. No, I replied honestly. Wait, Ron said, you said people, don't you mean boys? I repressed a snort. No, half of them are girls, I said. Women I changed internally, I mean people. Even if the men could be called boys without any slight against their maturity. I noted the look on his face and smiled. Hey look, I think we broke Ron, I said, patting him on the shoulder. There were snorts and giggles as Ron nodded with my assessment. Come on, dinner time's soon. Go get dressed, Hermione sighed in vague amusement. I hopped up the stairs to shower and throw on some clothes. Unfortunately, someone decided that there should be dinner and a show. 16 years, a sobbing voice called. I have lived and taught at Hogwarts for 16 years. You can't do this. I recognized a sobbing Professor Trelawney in the entrance hall. Well, I'm afraid I can, a sickly sweet voice. Ah, hell no, I thought to myself. I picked up a gravy boat and then put it down. In my bag there was a large flagon on liquid ghost fire and some matches. Bitch screeched horribly and slid over, her fat body wobbling in disgusting manner as I dumped it over her head. Potter, detention, she yelled, you impertinent little brat. I stared at her unimpressed and dropped the match. Fire sprang up and she began screaming and begging for her life. I moved over to where McGonagall was comforting our divination professor. I patted her on the arm comfortingly. Dolores, you do realize, McGonagall started, but I cut her off. No, don't, I said, shushing her. I want to see how long it takes. Dumbledore chose that moment to make his grand entrance and ruin it all. Dolores, pull yourself together, it's just ghost fire, he said contemptuously. And now we'll never know, I groaned. She stopped screaming and stood, still appearing for all the world like a walking flame. Deep shuddering breaths racking her pudgy frame. A simple finite causing the fire to go out, I pouted. Potter, detention for the rest of the year, she hissed. I nodded. It wasn't like I had been going anyway. Minerva, if you could escort Sybil back to her room, Dumbledore commanded, while the teacher that had previously been standing in a stunned stupor moved forwards to thank him in a babble of almost incoherent words. Dumbledore, may I remind you that under Article, Umbridge started to inject sharply. You have the authority to dismiss my teachers, you do not however have the power to banish them from the grounds. That power remains with the headmaster, he said in a harsh and loud almost shout. For now, she said in return. I imagine that it would have sounded sharp, sweet and annoyingly overconfident. Except I had just lit that bitch on fire and her voice was still shaky and slightly hoarse. See ya? Fred asked in a faintly awed voice as everyone bustled into the great hall after Dumbledore's cranky dismissal. Old man must be forgetting his nap times. Yeah? I asked. Marius, George said seriously as either of them could manage. Sorry boys, I said with a relishing grin, I'm not that easy. Not to mention if a mortal nabbed her, they'd probably be subsequently incinerated. Ah well, what do you think?